Good evening and welcome to another episode of ChedTalks. I'm so excited to be here again tonight. Once again, we're brought to you by Hookshot Media Productions, coming to you live from Ajax, Ontario. If you'd like some more information, please visit hookshot.com, in which you can get some creative content. So tonight, I want to introduce my guest. Her name is Keisha Richards. She is from the North Carolina area, and she's got a wonderful story. She's going to tell us about, she's going to take us through a journey of her story and how her resilience has been the kind of resilient chapter that she's written in her life and what she's going to do in the near future. So without further ado, let's welcome to our room, Keisha. Hey, Keisha, how are you?
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So we have a lot to cover tonight, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. First of all, you can tell us a little bit about yourself, and then and what you're doing, and maybe the company that you're with.
Okay. My name is Keisha Ridges. I'm right outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. I have a couple of children's centers called Luxury Learning Resort and Spa, and we started our company in December 11th, 2012, serving low-income families coming from poverty and impoverished neighborhoods. A lot of our families are champion survivors of domestic violence. And so we'll get into that, how God gave me the vision for the children's centers.
Okay, awesome. So thank you so much for the intro. Now, my audience, they're going to have a lot of questions, I hope, and we're going to walk you through that. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about your journey and some of the things that happened to you with regards to the domestic violence. And I really want you to share with us some of the details that's happened to you, and some of the red flags that that someone may need to look out for to help them avoid these same type of situations. So let's start at the beginning. This happened approximately what year? Let's talk about how it all started. Your courtship. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, I started dating my ex in 2005. We were introduced through mutual friends. He was a Sigma, for some a Delta, but we started communicating through an app called Black People Meet, because he was in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time, and I was living right outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. Right. Mm-hmm. So it was just pretty much online for like 6 months, but we would go and like date on the weekends and stuff like that. So we got pretty serious within the first year.
Right. Okay. After the first year, things got pretty serious. You guys started, so he'd take you out, you'd go out and to what places with your friends or what?
Yeah, he's a musician as well. So we would go to a lot of festivals, jazz festivals, African-American arts festivals. Our first date was at a place in Charlotte called the Jazz Cafe. And mm-hmm. So, I mean, as far as the courtship, we had a perfect courtship. We also had a lot of common interests too. So.
Right. So what kind of common interests?
I mean, just as far as like African-American studies, we did a lot of museums, reading, music. I played the clarinet, so we both had a musical background. And then also too, our faith. We attended church, each other's church in the first part of the courtship as well.
Right. And what kind of work? I mean, this is your courtship started just out of university or did you, or is this before school? School ended. When you were both finished?
We were both finished. I had started working on my master's. Okay. And so that's why in the beginning we didn't have a lot of time, because I was working full time and also pursuing my master's in business. So we were really limited to the weekend in the beginning.
Oh, okay. Okay. Go ahead.
I would say he's an engineer, so his job required him to travel a lot too. So he was only home on the weekends.
Oh, okay. All right. I see. So he's an engineer. What kind of engineer?
Electrical engineer.
Electrical engineer. Okay, so that's awesome. You guys both in prominent positions, looking for a great future. Yes. And what do those plans look like? I mean, obviously you must have sat together, try to come up with some future plans. What your future was going to look like.
Yes, sir. We wanted children. I had a son at that time who was 4 from a previous relationship. He didn't have any children. So when we got together, he was willing to accept me and my child. We came as a package deal. But we talked about the future and how our careers look, and with the traveling, because my job required me to travel too. I was working for Migrant Head Start. So I was traveling up and down the East Coast. So wanting to spend more time with each other and how that looked with having kids, but we needed to get married first.
Right. Okay. Okay. So you he was traveling, you were traveling, you had a son. How that must have been pretty tough.
It was. It was. I had a lot of family support. My parents at that time, both of my parents were living, so they were providing a lot of custodial care to my 4-year-old at that time. But the whole plan was once he entered kindergarten, I was going to take another job anyway, so I could be at home. But at that time, I was sort of chasing the corporate ladder, trying to secure salaries, and I
Right.
was used to be independent, so it was important for me at that point.
Okay. And obviously he's trying to climb up the corporate ladder as well. So you're both have merging careers and looking for potentially a future with kids.
Yes,
Now you said you both live close to your family, not his.
yes, he was originally from Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
And so he ended up in Charlotte because right after graduation, he took a position there.
Okay. All right. So then what? So you guys move in together at that point?
Yeah, we were sort of like on the weekends I would go stay at his place. I had my own place here in Sanford, North Carolina at the time. And so his job required him to travel, so he was able to transfer and move in with me in Sanford, North Carolina,
Right. Okay.
because his job was pretty much working remotely.
Right. And so this is now, I guess, going a year or so that's into the relationship.
Yeah, shortly after a year.
Hmm. And then what happened? What made everything change?
Well, we got engaged
Right.
before the baby. We got engaged, and I will say probably 3 months before we were scheduled to get married, I found that I was pregnant.
Hmm.
So that's what made me call the wedding off because I didn't want to walk down the aisle big and all this stuff. But so
So
I
you
felt
didn't do the shotgun thing either.
no, and I didn't want to do that. And so, but I felt like it was divine intervention as well.
Right. Oh, okay. All right. So then you moved in together,
Hmm.
right? And then you started seeing signs.
Yeah, I started seeing. I was very patient. I'm always very patient with my family, but I started seeing the control happen. And
Right.
like I said, the courtship was perfect, but it became, I love you. We need to start spending more time together and focus on our family and
Right.
limit the time that I was, spending with my family because my family saw the red flags before I did.
Hmm. All right. And you said your father was a pastor, you said?
Yes,
And he saw the signs before you?
yes, he did.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your relationship with your dad and when did he see the signs and what did he say?
He was just pretty much like wanting me to maintain my independence and be autonomous. He was like, I raised you to be independent, and don't just give up your dreams and your future and get behind and supporting his dreams. So, and I was like, well, I have to do what's best for the family.
Right.
And another thing was when I was working on my master's, he wanted me to enroll in culinary arts because I really couldn't cook. And I didn't have no problem doing that, but I felt like because I was being competitive, he didn't have a master's at that moment, and I did. And I felt like he didn't want me to obtain my master's degree before him. And so part of that distraction was to go ahead and enroll in culinary arts because, again, that's going to better our family.
Wow. So that's, I guess he's starting to curtail you a little bit. He's starting to push you in the direction that you didn't want to go.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how did you handle that? And I guess that was one of the first signs you gathered.
Right. I'm not going to even say at that time I handled it, but I have a best friend who's been my best friend since 1994. She was the first to really speak out against it because, like currently right now, I'm finishing up my second year of law school, but I had gotten accepted into law school in 2006 and I didn't go because,
Right.
again, I found out I was pregnant and he was like, going to law school, how is that going to impact our family? It's going to be very demanding. So I felt like that was a dream deferred as well.
Right.
And so my friends started speaking out along with my family about the red flags. But at that time, I was like, well, he's great. He's college educated. He loves me and my son. So I was sort of overlooking all of those red flags.
Right. And how was he manipulating you? Was he forceful at that time? Was he just kind of making, suggestions and kind of pushing you in that way?
I'm not going to say he was forceful at that time because the physical abuse didn't occur a lot. It was more the emotional because,
Right.
like I said, I was pregnant, so I'm gaining weight. And then I couldn't cook. So it was like he wanted me to be domesticated, which I was not very domesticated at that moment. So it was sort of like, okay, well, I need you to, maintain your figure. But I'm like, I'm pregnant. I need you to maintain the house, cook and clean, but at the same time, I'm working just as much as you are, and I'm going to school full time.
Wow. Yeah, that must have been taxing. So then
Very.
what, okay, so going back to your relationship with your dad, what did your father say at that time?
Well, I pretty much told him that, I was grown. He needed to sort of fall back and allow me to go through life and experience things myself. And he did that, occasionally. And I even stopped going around my parents' house because I didn't want to hear my father keep drilling. It was creating a wedge with my family as well as a wedge within my household, my fiance at the time.
Right. And these are very subtle, I guess, changes that he was kind of manipulating.
Right.
Oh, okay. All right. So fast forward now, you're going through these changes, I guess, relatively happy in some way, maybe.
Well, I'm not, I was content.
You were content.
I
Okay.
was content because I felt like at that moment, everything on the outside looked good for my careers, the home, it looked good. But my
Right.
smile, I have a natural smile, but my smile started becoming forced at that point. And even I would come home from work in the evening and sit in the car, not really wanting to go in the house.
Mm,
But he traveled a
okay.
lot with his job, so the trips that he was away, I was the most happy at that moment.
Okay. So
So
that's when you
that's when I started realizing, hey, something's not right with this person.
something's not right. Okay. All right. So now you said there were I guess more of a verbal abuse or mental manipulation abuse. What does that mean? How for my viewers? What does that mean? How does he do that? And what should people look out for?
Like even telling me how to dress, even with my makeup. Like I don't really wear makeup, but I was trying to sort of feel good about myself, so I started wearing makeup. And he was like, "No, I need you to be natural. How to wear my hair? It's just little things like that."
Right.
Um, Even when being around his family, we would go visit his family in Kentucky. What to say, and I was always asking questions, wanting to figure out, his childhood and things like that. But it's like I was sort of hushed, like muffled a little bit. Like, okay, I had a muzzle. Like, okay, just don't ask those questions. So once people started showing me those red flags, I started picking up very fast.
Okay. So what was his family like? Did they volunteer any information? I guess they were keeping hush because he didn't want the information to get out.
Well, the red flag was he wasn't very close with his family. And my father at that point pointed out to me that anybody that's distant from their family and don't have a relationship is a red flag.
Mhm.
And he asked me, so I was the one forcing him to go home and visit his family because my father was basically like, you need to meet his family. You need to get to
Right.
know his background. Where as before I was like, oh, don't force it. He's always busy. So, but they
Mhm.
were very estranged as well.
Okay. All right. So then so you were pregnant. How long? A few months in, you
Hmm.
guys are at each other a little bit. What?
Not really, because my son was born in 2007, and that actually brought us closer.
Okay.
The control went away. I think my son being born because I told him I wasn't happy, but at the same time he was like, I'm going to work on it, and we did do counseling, but that was a whole other issue too because he chose the counselor, and once the counselor started sort of not really siding with me, but sort of pointing out his issues, we stopped going to counseling. So
Right.
at that point, it was like, let's get married. But I was using the excuse of trying to lose weight because I knew that the marriage was not for us.
Right.
And then I got pregnant again with our second child.
Okay. So you got pregnant. Um, it was up and down with the verbal abuse and some manipulation. You had the child, and this was a second chance, kind of. And you
Right.
decided, okay, let's give it a shot. Go into counseling, and he says, let's quit the counseling. Let's just get married.
Right. And
Ah,
I wanted a wedding because I was at that point, I was started making up any excuses to sort of prolong the marriage.
right. Okay. And you still loved him?
I loved him, but I was falling out of love with him. And I love the idea of being a family and for my son, my oldest son at that time, to have a father in his life.
Right. So people are looking on right now and asking the question, okay, so some people are so in love with the idea of marriage or so in love with the idea of being in love, they actually miss the red flags or they miss um, the all the signs that may tell them that this may not be the right path because they're just love with the idea of it all, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. So then you're pregnant again,
Hmm.
and now something happens. You're 4 or 5 months in.
hmm So what happened? My best friend, she was very vocal from day one about this is not the man for you. You need to work on an exit strategy. And I was like, no, because I was even coming against my best friend at the time.
Mhm.
And I started spending more time with my sorority sisters and my best friend, and that was causing riffraff and tension in the household.
Right.
And he had a porn addiction, but he was accusing me of cheating. Everything that he was doing, he was accusing me of doing.
He was what, sorry?
He was accusing me of cheating, but he was the one cheating.
Oh, okay.
And he had a porn addiction, and he admitted that. We were praying for that, but at the same time, I couldn't meet his sexual needs, type of thing. So that was more the abuse that I was going through.
Hmm. Okay. So then he had these affairs, and you called him out on it.
hmm
Okay. And what did he do?
Well, he told me that, if I wasn't happy, we were going to split. And we agreed. So basically, after I had the second child, that I was going to leave because at that time, remember, I gave up my job to be a stay at home mom.
Mhm.
So that's when the control really set in because we both had very comfortable salaries, and I gave all it up to be able to focus on my family. And he was able to maintain everything, but once I didn't have my own income, the control really, really set in. And he started telling me things about how I was burdensome and pretty much I was baggage.
Ah, okay. And so it got physical,
Yes,
right? Okay.
two times really.
Two
So,
times.
2 times. So 2 nights before, I lost out. Okay. So the first time we got into altercation, I was sitting in, we had a half bath, and I was sitting in the half bath, and we were talking through the door about, I'm not being happy. And he was threatening me, and I was talking junk back. And he opened up the door and choked me as I was sitting on the toilet. And so I accepted it. Yeah, he choked me, and I was pregnant, 5 months pregnant, but I wasn't scared. At that point, I was fearful in the beginning, but then I was sort of like bold with it. Like, okay, you know what? I'm willing to risk it all because I'm not happy. And my kids are hearing this at that moment. My 2-year-old was even young enough to remember some of these events. So 2 nights later, I was getting out the shower, same conversation about when you're going to leave, get out. And I said, I'm going to leave when I'm ready to leave because I would started back working in at this moment. And I was trying to save up enough money for deposits and stuff. And when I got out the shower, he flung me into the sink and hit me directly when I fell into the sink. Of course, that's what caused me to go into preterm labor.
Mm.
That's the impact.
So he pushed you?
Well, yeah, he swung me. He sort of swung me into the sink. And I
Pregnant.
went,
You were 5 months pregnant, and he slung
yeah,
you in.
yes. I was 21 weeks pregnant.
Okay. And what happened at that point?
Well, that night I started packing my bags. I didn't have any signs of trauma with the pregnancy. I wasn't in any pain, but I was going to leave anyway because I saw things escalated. And I remember going upstairs and getting a knife and sleeping with it in the guest bedroom.
Mhm.
And the next morning I went to work. And when I was at work, my water broke.
Right.
That's what caused me to go to emergency room.
Right. Okay. And you went into the hospital, and
hmm
and you had a dramatic moment there. So to tell me a little bit about, or share with us what happened then. You're in the hospital, water broke, induced labor. What happened?
All right, and I asked the doctor, I said, well, what does that mean? And the doctor said it means you're going to have a baby today, tonight, or tomorrow. And I was like, wow, at 21 weeks. And so they ended up having to do an emergency C-section because the baby was pretty much the heartbeat was dropping.
Right.
So at that point, they started wheeling me in, put me under, anesthesiology, and the doctor said it's a chance that you and your daughter might not make it if it comes down to having to make a decision as to who to save or what life you want to fight for. I need to make the decision at that moment. So I told the doctor, I said, well, my best friend was in there with me at the time, and I said, I'm going to have to fight for my life because I have 2 other kids that need me.
Right.
And they told me it was a chance that she wouldn't make it through the surgery, and she did. She made it as well as myself, and she lived for two and a half
So
years.
so hold up a second. I can't imagine. So the doctor gives you such. You're in the hospital fighting, and the doctor gives you the option to choose between your life and your child's life at 5. Oh my God. So I don't even know how you found the strength to be able to do that. what was going through your mind at that point?
Because I was falling under anesthesiology. I was really sedated. But I remember telling my best friend, I remember looking to my left, seeing her, and I remember looking at the doctor, and I said, I want to live. My boys need me. I remember that. And that was the last thing that I said, and before I was out.
Wow. Okay. So, but the decision was ultimately yours. So
Yes.
you're under anesthetic and they ask you that question?
Yes. Right before, because they had already started working me up because they needed to perform surgery right then and there.
Right. Okay. All right. So now you make the decision, and what happened? You go into surgery.
So once the surgery was done, they were immediately going to life flight my daughter to UNC because I had her at Central Carolina Hospital in Sanford, North Carolina, and they needed to life flight her to UNC because they didn't have the equipment.
Right.
And by being 21 weeks, they don't fight for children less than 21 weeks. But she was the same day that cutoff was the same day that they used to rule to fight for children.
Wow.
So they told me that it's a chance she wouldn't make it on the life flight because they had to take her off the ventilator.
Right.
So I was already preparing my mind that, okay, hey, she's going to, transition to her heavenly home. I was at peace with it at that point.
Right.
So once she got and 15 minutes later, once she got to Chapel Hill, they told me that she had made it through the life flight. So it was like I kept having ounces of hope along the way, but I was still prepared for the ultimate, okay, if she passed away.
Right. Okay. So she passed away how long after?
2.5 weeks after.
2.5 weeks. Okay. And how did you feel at that point? How did you handle that?
Well, I was optimistic, but I felt also, in a sense, I felt like I was being burdened because she had lost a lot of oxygen, and it was a strong chance that she was in special needs. And as a computer, I worked with children with special needs, so I knew what that meant for me.
Right.
And I knew I was preparing for my exit strategy. So I knew that responsibility would fall solely on me.
Yeah. So how do you let go?
Prayer, faith,
Faith.
acknowledgement.
Right. Okay. I understand that. Okay. So now, what happens next? Like, how do you move on with your life? So, you were still fighting for your life, from what I recall. You're still up and down.
Right. So about 5 days, because we were both at Chapel Hill, UNC at this time. She was in the NICU, and they allowed me to bring her into my room.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time she had started, I'm going to say, deteriorating a little bit, because the first couple of days she was moving her head and she was doing things that she was not supposed to be doing.
Right.
The doctor at that time told me it's considered the honeymoon stage.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was doing things that, like lifting her head, she was pulling out her feeding tubes, and the things that she was doing was sort of like, okay, we understand. And the doctor asked me, he says, "Are you a woman of God?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I had my pastor there, and he said, "So you know what's happening here?" And I said, "Well, absolutely." I said, "But can you clarify?" And my pastor jumped in and said, "God can see further down the road than we can."
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand. I couldn't accept it at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked me, since she was sort of deteriorating, if I wanted to basically pull the plug off the vent.
Right.
And I said, you know what? If she's only living off this vent, I'm going to let God take its course. I don't want to play God and get ahead of God. So if she's, going to expire, I want her to do it naturally. And that's what we did.
Oh, okay. And how long after did she expire?
Probably for about 4 hours after that decision.
Oh, okay. So she still fought through for 4 hours, huh?
Oh yeah, she fought, and like I said, the last 2 hours, my mom and my ex and my family, they had their goodbyes, but I was at peace. I really was. I had a calming over me, and I was at peace with everything.
Right. Okay. So then what happened with you and the ex? At that point, there's a separation right away?
No, we had to plan a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
We had to,
So you had to go through the entire funeral and. Wow.
We donated her organs, but we didn't do a cremation. We had a funeral. She had a casket like the size of a shoebox. And after we did that, I was still at home with him, and I had started packing up at that point because he pretty much gave me 2 weeks to get out. And I was like, I told him 2 weeks, but I knew it would only take me 3 days to get out because I had already arranged for my family and my sorority sisters to come help me move while he was away.
Mm. So he gave you 2 weeks to get out, or that's what you requested?
No, because before he was like, so what are we going to do? What are we going to do here? So remind you, like, I'm here, I'm home, I'm pumping because I'm still having to pump my breasts. Because my body is still thinking that I'm with child, so I'm dealing with that. And because I had an emergency C-section, my mom had to dress me because they had to make an incision. So she had to come over daily and change my gauze and all that stuff. So I'm dealing with a lot of medical issues. Forget postpartum because I'm on meds now.
Right.
And I'm loopy, I'm talking out of my head. So now my mom is concerned. My parents are concerned
Right.
about my mental state at this moment.
Okay. Were there any charges held against him? Did you
No,
bring it up?
no, we sort of talked about that. They sent the counselors and stuff at UNC into the room, and because they took X-rays and everything. And I think if I would have pressed the issue, maybe so, because they did talk about the abuse, and I was honest about it. But I didn't really go into detail about the trauma and the impact. But I really believe the X-rays, because that was the question that they kept focusing on: the impact. Did you follow, and all of that stuff.
Mm. Okay. So what happened after that? You separated. Did you forgive him?
Oh, not right away. Okay, so my sorority sister. So now it's like 4 weeks later, and we had I'm a Delta, so my sorority had a national convention in New Orleans. So I had moved out with my mom at that point, and my sorority sisters, they were like, "You're going to go to this national convention," but we were sort of keeping my child away because we didn't have custody, and I didn't have the money to fight for custody.
Right.
So, and in North Carolina, the way it works is whoever has physical custody of the child has custody until it's settled in the courts. So
Okay.
he was calling me, texting me. My 2-year-old at that time was crying for daddy because as far as being a parent, nothing negative to say as far as a parent, nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just really, until we had custody, it was very heated. It's a lot of conflict. And
Right.
even in the courtroom, he painted me out to be a monster. He blamed everything on me. And because he had more money than I did at that moment, really, I had to literally fight for my child. I was going to lose my custody of my kid.
Mm.
I was being railroaded.
Okay. So he railroaded you, physically abused you, mentally abused you, and he wants your kid.
Yes, that was the ultimate thought. Yes.
Okay. So do you take any responsibility whatsoever in the entire thing? Is there anything that came from your side?
Yes, I would say not speaking up sooner because I allowed a lot of things to happen. I've always been a strong woman, even physically. Um, but I was trying to really make it work because my son, my oldest son, I had the career, but I wanted the family,
Right.
because that's what I grew up with. My parents were married, from high school, even my dad was in the military. So I wanted the same thing. So at that point, I was like, nobody's going to really want me being a single mother. This guy really loves me and my child. And, so I just hate that I didn't speak up sooner and put my foot down.
Okay. All right. So then, you transitioned. You passed it. You got your child. Life goes on. What do you do next?
Well, life went on, but I went from having 5 bedroom, 4 bath, staying in a very super wealthy neighborhood, luxury home to now I had to buy a rehab home beside my mom. We pay cash for it,
Mm-hmm.
fixing it up. So my 2-year-old, my kids now are saying, wow, we want daddy because the lifestyle changed.
Right.
At that moment, physically, medically, I couldn't work. So now I'm trying to deal with DSS, receiving public assistance.
Right.
So
Okay.
through the custody battle, they had to walk through the house to show that I was a fit mother. So being a professional in early childhood working with children and families, it's like I was on trial having to prove to the state that I was fit to be a mother. And the decision was really being made on money.
Right.
And I'm a North Carolina parent certified educator. I work with families for over 20 years at this point, but I still had to prove to the court that I was fit.
Oh my
You know.
goodness. And he was just moving along.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Dating, slandering my name, all of that stuff. But even we would meet at the sheriff's office to exchange custody of my son.
Mm-hmm.
but he had a way of intimidation, like just by looking at me. Um, and I wasn't intimidated. I was more afraid as to my response because at that point, now let me just back up a little. While I was on maternity leave, I was at home watching Snapped, and that's why you have to be careful what you feed your spirit, because I was watching that show every day, and in my mind, I had really snapped. And I knew about postpartum. You know, I have a nursing degree as well. I knew about postpartum, and I was like, if he puts his hands on me, I had already planned what I was going to do to him, push him down the stairs of our home. And I knew at that point when I started sharing with my best friend, she was like, you got to get out of here. Because I was like, I'd rather go away, spend the rest of my life in prison, not continuing dealing with this situation. So,
Right. Well, that's awfully brave. And we have some comments. I think some of our viewers there. Thank you for sharing your story. If you can, producer can send back some of them. Nancy says, "Oh, pleasure. A praise for you for telling your story. Yeah, got bad eyes. Amazing and strong. Yes, she is. So yeah, everyone's just sending their prayers and thanking you for your strength, sharing your story so far. But we have the good part of this story now. So now we're going to tell about how you transitioned into this business, and tell us a little bit about what obviously what you went through was one of the motivating factors. But tell us a little bit about now how you started and what your next steps are.
okay. I've always been in early childhood, but I've always been on an administrative level. Like I've been a federal reviewer for Head Start. So I took a job to be close to my boys and be home every night. So I was working as an executive director of this nonprofit. So once I was in that capacity, I started learning that a lot of families, like myself, had same issues. They were going to the domestic violence shelter that I volunteered at as a professional.
Mhm.
And I found myself doing my testimony, at the same shelter, but this time as a
Good.
participant.
Right.
And I
So you're
remember,
working there. You're working there. All of a sudden, now you're one of the patients or one of
right,
the
participant,
clients. Yeah.
right.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just like I said, God was in control the entire time. But at that point, I started praying and asking God, okay, because I was still bitter and I
Mhm.
was putting in front for my kids, being happy, but they knew mommy, they knew something wasn't right. So I just started praying to God, and I grew closer a relationship with God. And I asked God, I said, what am I supposed to do with all of this? I knew I needed to let it go. And I knew I needed to forgive him. And even my friends at the time, my sorority sisters was like, forgive him. They kept bringing up all the hurt. So I had to silence everybody's opinion about me and the situation, and just lean on the word and ask God for guidance through it all. And at that time, I was living off my credit cards. Money was tight. I had a repossession. One of my vehicles was repossessed. So I started losing everything except for my house.
Right.
And I ended up fixing it, up to make it a home. And God gave me a vision one night about my own children's center. I said, I've made a lot of people money through the years, but I'm like, God, okay, how am I going to start my own children's center with bad credit and no money? And my pastor told me at the time, God will raise up the right person. You won't need credit. You won't need money. He'll raise those individuals. And sure enough, Chadwick, like that's exactly what started happening. I started buying things off of Craigslist, put it in my storage in the backyard, buying daycare materials, write my policies and stuff. And one day I go to Wells Fargo, and the lady told me that it was a building available across the street for rent.
Mhm.
And I was like, I want to do a children's center. I said, my credit is bad. She says, well, you think you can pay the rent? And I said, absolutely. She gave me the landlord's name. I went to talk to him and told him what my vision was and my experience. He says, I'm not concerned about your credit. All I need to know is that you can pay the rent every month. And that was my start. And I couldn't really afford like the people with the fancy degrees, what the state required. But a lot of my family from the shelter, they had children um, from domestic violence experiences, and they were CPS involved. So I went to DSS and got my first contract. And a lot of the children that came in the beginning, they were families like my children. They were in safe shelters, and we were sort of safe haven in the community. And so that's how we started.
Wow.
You know,
And now, how long have you been in operations now?
since 2012.
Wow, that's amazing. And now you're flourishing, right? Things are moving a lot better.
And not only me, it's sort of like when my parents would come in, people would say, oh, they see the finished product, but my parents were there with me every step of the way. They were sort of like my inspiration because a lot of them, they were going to court as I was going to court. They didn't have money. They were dealing with Section 8 and public assistance. So we were sort of going together. And I saw a lot of them getting their cars, getting their apartments or their homes. And so once I moved out from my house, I started renting in nicer neighborhood. And at the same time, so it's like we were becoming self-sufficient,
Right.
dependent upon the system. So I started giving back as well as my family. So that's how I know it was all a part of God's plans because I lost my daughter, but I inherited so many children and families throughout that process.
Right. Marie Clark, she's commenting there. The transformation is definitely something that many women need to hear, and that is so true. There's so many people that are going through things, and your story, I'm sure, inspires some people to say, "Look, I can do this." Sometimes we think we're sitting, we're in a situation where it's only us, but if we look around, we can definitely seek and see that there are other people that are going through something very similar. Thank you so much, Marie, for your encouragement.
And I see Diane's comment about the going through the valley to get to the mountaintop. And I tell people a lot, my valley moments were my best moments. I was the happiest during my valley moments. I was healthy. I was whole. I was humbled through it all. So I thank God for my valley moments. And, financially, God has restored everything that I've lost through the years. I'm happy. Even as far as dating, I made sure not to jump into a relationship because I wasn't healthy and I was bitter. And I had to really look at myself and say, how did I allow myself to get so low, to allow somebody to verbally abuse me? And go back to my father, what he said, a mountain can be so strong, but eventually when you chip away at it long enough, it's going to fall. And so the fact that Diane mentioned that, so I had to use that because that's what he said about the mountain.
So it's just like, I always, my way to look at it is you eat that big elephant one small bite at a time, and that's how you achieve it. And kudos to you for continuing to stay at it, working hard, believing your God, your faith, and that'll certainly take you far. That's awesome. So what's next for Keisha? What's next?
What's next is I will continue with the children's centers. Like I said, I have one more year of law school in hopes of becoming a criminal defense attorney.
Wow.
And I want to make sure that if people are like, well, you need to do child and family law, and I might, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure that people have a voice once I graduate, and that regardless, if you don't have the money, I'm willing to fight for you that you can be a good parent without money. Because if I didn't have my family come through for me, I would have lost my son because I didn't have the money. Right. And of course, no one's going to represent you if you can't retain them. So,
so you're gonna be like one of those the superheroes. You're
right.
Yeah. Right. You're gonna fly in and scoop them up and help make their life a lot easier, and then fly back out.
Right.
Okay, awesome.
So I've been helping a lot of my family start businesses. Like I said, the children's centers are my first priority. It's my first love. I love children and families. I've worked as a teacher, a director, a federal reviewer for Head Start, and now having my own business. I love it. The money in the beginning wasn't great, but I was getting rewarded in so many other ways. And like my pastor told me years ago, don't chase the money. The money will come. And years later, I haven't had to really market my program. Word of mouth is how we get a lot of our families. So like I said, I'm blessed just for the staff as well as my family and the community.
Yeah. So for those people out there, so women that are going through some of this, or anyone that maybe find themselves in a situation where they're struggling and they're in a situation that they can't find a way out. What do you say? What's your advice to them?
Speak up.
Speak up.
Don't be silenced. Don't be embarrassed. Okay. Because the more you speak up, you realize everybody has some issues that they're dealing with. And when you speak up, you start meeting people that say, oh, wow, I'm going through the same thing. Or I've gone through the same thing. Let me push you in contact with this individual.
Right.
And but I was trying to mask it because I was ashamed as to what people would think. I was sort of like, the good girl in high school, parent coming from, that type of background. So I was sort of trained that people were going to say, oh, so she's not perfect. She's not this and that. So I just pretended a lot. I wore a mask before COVID. I was
Right.
masking every day for about a year.
Right. So I guess, yeah, I guess the shame and all that after, people speaking ill of you and pointing and speaking behind your back, I guess that must have been something to deal with. How did you deal with that?
I had to really tune out all the distractions and the background noise. I was already sort of isolated because he didn't really want me hanging with my friends and stuff. And
Mhm.
my sorority, we would do community service. So I started opening up those lines of communication again. When people would call and check on me, I would ignore the phone calls. So I started going to my chapter meetings with my sorority, doing community service. And so just sort of having women from different walks of life speak life into me.
Right. So what do you suggest to people about repairing? How do you tell them to repair after that?
I would say the repair comes in just acknowledging. You have to acknowledge the trauma and the series of events because
Mhm.
sometimes it's easy to say, okay, hey, it didn't happen. Like, and with me, it's sort of hard because I didn't want my children to look at him in a negative light. So I
Yeah.
masked a lot because really when it came time of him being a dad, I have nothing negative. Even to this day, I have nothing negative to say. So I bit the bullet for their best interest,
Right.
but the healing had to take place with me.
Right.
And now, like when we exchange for custody, like my son is 13, and it's like when he sees me now, he sees that I'm happy, and he's made comments. Keisha, you look really happy. You
Right.
know, like years later, we don't talk about the details, but
Mhm.
he's apologized through the years, and we co-parent. Like I feel like we have a great co-parent relationship.
Right.
But every now and then, something like my son, he's 13, so he's learning to manipulate parents.
Right.
Every now and then he wants to blame me if something
Right.
happens to my son, and we'll go back to what happened years later, before.
Right.
So
Okay. So what? How do you describe a personality like that? I mean, you know, it's very difficult for some people to be able to understand that type of personality. Well, it's someone. I mean, he obviously manipulated. He abused, and you forgave him, and you moved on, and you've become amicable, and and you're seeing other patterns. You're seeing him repeat the same patterns again with his new.
yes, because when we got together, he had already been married and divorced.
Mhm.
So I would have been his second marriage, but I dodged the bullet. And then he got married. Literally, so like, okay. So then he got married to his second wife, and now he's on his third wife. So through the years, I would see women coming and going. And the last real altercation that we had was a bad argument. I told his current wife they were engaged at the moment, and I said, "Oh, in a matter of time, you'll start seeing the signs."
Right.
And because she was blaming me for something that she shouldn't have been speaking on, and she went and told him, and he was like, "How could you tell her that?" And I said, "I didn't lie at all," because she wanted to know what happened to our relationship. So I told her the truth, but he
Okay.
denied a lot of it, but it was the truth.
Okay. What was his upbringing like?
Very entitled. They were super wealthy.
Okay.
Um, I mean, he's a twin, and he's total opposite of his twin.
No. Okay.
So he was,
I see the movies. It
huh?
sounds like a movie. Sound like a movie.
I've heard that through the years, Chad, but yes, yes.
Okay, so yeah, we're getting close to the time now, and I just want to thank you so much for joining me tonight and joining our audience. There are going to be people all over that are really inspired by your journey, your destination, and all the things that's happened to you. I thank you again from the bottom of my heart for really sharing that, because I think it really opens up some perspective, and it gets us to think about how we can not only move on, but how we can heal, and not so much dwelling on what's happened in the past, but focusing on what you're going to have to do in the future. I maintain that what's happened in the past and what's happened in the future does not exist. It's what's in the moment that we have to be concerned about. So thank you so much again for joining me tonight. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing your story. And I just want to thank everyone with their questions. Do we have any additional questions? People are just saying, thank you so much, Keisha. She bless you, Queen. Yeah, thank you. That's Nancy. What else do we have? Do we have any other comments? No, that's all the comments. My producer just told me that's all the comments for tonight. Again, thank you so much, and bless on your journey, and hope to see you on Clubhouse again when we
Absolutely.
find out some more.
Yeah, I'll continue to share my testimony. Like I said, each time I share it, healing takes place. So I'm just thankful and humble and honored to be here on your show tonight.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so we'll speak again. Hopefully, we can do this again sometimes.
Sure.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank
And
you.
that's all for tonight. Next episode of Ched Talks next Wednesday. I will not tell you who my guests are, but hope you have a great night. Good night.